Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Hamley. Back in the day, as they say, we were known as the Barbaras. I in television news management, and my guest today, the other Barbara, on the anchor desk. And Barbara Ciara is the grande dame of television news in Hampton Roads, but her reach is international, bringing you stories from around the world and right here in your backyard. And now, as she approaches 50 years in media, she's saying farewell to TV news and hello to a brand new chapter. Up close and personal with News 3 anchor Barbara Ciara. That's next on Another View, right after this news from NPR and WHRO News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Hamley. Webster's Dictionary defines the word icon like this: a person or thing widely admired, especially for having great influence or significance in a particular sphere. That's the perfect description of my guest today on Another View. Barbara Ciara is not only an iconic journalist, she's also a mom, a grandma, a great-grandma, engaged and very soon to be a wife, and is about to step off the anchor desk and start the next chapter of her exciting life. Please welcome to Another View one of my closest, dearest besties on the planet, Barbara Ciara. Hey there.
Thank you for having me, Barbara. It's always a pleasure to be here with you on Another
here's
View.
What's going to be really funny, whether or not you wind up interviewing me or I'm interviewing you. So, okay, because we know how this rolls, right?
Everything's on the table.
Everything's on the table. So I have the first question I want to ask you. When you were a little girl, did you pick up the hairbrush and use it like a mic and say, I'm going to be a journalist? How did you get into this business?
No, I didn't use a hairbrush. It was a spatula. And I was thinking that I would be the next Gladys Knight.
Oh, there you go.
So that's what I thought was going to be my future because my father sang, my mom, and so I thought that I would go into music. So it wasn't until junior high that I actually caught fire with journalism.
And what happened in junior high?
Oh, my goodness. Well, of course, I've always been sort of a firebrand.
No,
and,
really?
So back in those days at Knoxville Junior High School in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, girls were only permitted to wear slacks if it was a snow day. And I thought that this was so unfair, and add to that, there were protests daily on the evening news, whether it was Vietnam or civil rights. So I assembled a group of friends and we had placards and a protest in the school cafeteria during lunch hour saying that we should be able to wear pants too. I was enraged that it was not in the school newspaper.
They didn't cover it.
They did not cover it. So I marched myself into the English teacher's office, who was the editor, and told her this is the biggest thing since pizza in the cafeteria, and this should have been covered, and wah, wah, wah. And she said, if you're so smart, why don't you work on the paper? And so that was my entree into journalism.
Oh, wow. Now, a lot of people think that you started here in Hampton Roads in terms of your broadcast journalism career, but that's not true. You actually started way out west.
Oh, way out west in Tucson, Arizona, which is where I started college. And so my career in television began in 1976. And so that's where I started working in broadcast news.
So where did the name Ciara come from?
Well, that's a very interesting story. But what I'll say about that is this. My birth name was Jones. And there were so many Joneses in the phone book, if you remember the phone book
Yes.
back then. I thought, how do I distinguish myself? And at the time, many people in broadcast did change their name to either make it less ethnic or to make it simplified for the television audience. And so I took on that name to distinguish myself from the 1,000 other Joneses in the phone book.
Now, somebody asked me when I was out, how we always doing speaking engagements and so forth. They said, why does Barbara have, she has a different accent on the word Ciara. You say Ciara now.
Well, that was interesting, too, because on a trip to Spain a few years ago, I introduced myself to a group of locals, and they said, so, darling, why do you pronounce your name incorrectly? And I said, well, given that I adopted this name, how is it supposed to be said? And so they said, it's Ciara, darling. It's not Ciara. I said, well, that's a simple fix. When I get home, I'm going to say it correctly.
So how did you get from Tucson? I know there's a lot of stuff in between all of this, but how did you get from Tucson to Hampton Roads, and why Norfolk?
Well, it's almost like fate played a role in that. When I was in Tucson, I had worked there up to that point 5 years, right? And so the general manager, Gene Adelstein, had promoted me to news director. But a couple of years after that, there was a retooling and reshuffling in the newsroom, and he kind of eliminated half my staff. And I took that as the tea leaves. That's the writing on the wall. The news department is going to be less important to this independent television station. So I started looking for new work with his blessing, because he said, listen, I'm not sure what the future is going to be for the news department. So I had an offer in Wichita, Kearney, Nebraska, and Norfolk, Virginia.
Wow. And you wanted to come back east.
I wanted to come back east, closer to Pittsburgh, which is where I was born.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, when you became news director, though, while you were in Tucson, you were the first African-American and the first female? Is that correct?
The youngest
female. Okay.
And the first African-American to hold that title in the Southwest.
Yeah, I can kind of relate to that.
I know you can.
to that
Miss
type of thing.
Record-breaking Barbara Ham Lee.
But so when you came here first to Wavy TV.
No, first to WVEC.
So you were at VEC twice?
Yes.
Wow. See, I learned something new. I thought I knew all of this.
From 81 to 83, I was at WVEC. And Andy Barton, who was at Wavy at the time, said that, listen, I know that I heard through the grapevine that you had an interest in anchoring other shows. And he offered me a job. And that was only after I was told by the general manager at the time at WVEC that he had been in this market forever, and that he did not see where the audience would accept a black female anchor on prime time. And so I thought there's no future here. So I accepted the job.
Because you came in, you were on weekends at that point?
No, I was Monday through Friday, but I was doing the cut-ins for Good Morning America at WVEC.
Okay. It's interesting kind of coming full circle, because when you came to, and I don't know if you remember this, when you came to TKR, there was a hangout place, I won't name the establishment, where we all used to go.
Yes.
And the owner said to me, and as I was news director,
I remember that.
That they didn't believe that you, and it was Tom Randall's at the time, that Hampton Roads was ready for two African-American anchors. In this area too.
There was definitely a mindset here that slowly evolved over time, but you were here long enough to remember when people thought that was just so odd. People didn't think it was odd to see two Caucasians co-anchoring, but they thought it was odd to see two black people anchoring. And that was something that was difficult for me to wrap my head around, because all I was interested in was the journalism. So who can tell it best? Who can report it best? Who can relate this story to your audience best? And that's the uphill climb that we've been fighting since I got here in the 80s, particularly in the 90s. And now there does seem to be a few exhale moments for us here.
That's very true. That is very true. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. What do you want to say to Barbara as she prepares for her next chapter? Make it nice, people.
Or nasty.
She's right. She doesn't care. Or
I
nasty.
don't care.
757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Having worked at all three stations and WHRO,
Yes.
public media, so I'll say 4 stations in the market, each news department has its own rhythm, its own style of doing news, and so forth. As an anchor, did you have to change your style to fit the eyewitness news format versus the action news format versus the, on your side format, that kind of thing? Did you have to make any shifts in your delivery?
I think not delivery, but I think that the shifts came with each new news director, each new general manager. So it didn't matter what television station, at that time I was working for. It mattered whether they had a consulting group that wanted you to be more animated. But that's where I kind of held the line. It was like, in order for me to feel authentic, I can't be staged, and I can't lean on the desk this way and that way.
Yeah.
So I resisted that for all of my career. There are some things that you really had to relent to, like, okay, can you please keep one hairstyle for a while because we don't want to take your photograph every 2 months, or, something like that. But for the most part, all of the television stations seem to have the same kind of model, and their consultants spoke the same language. So it was up to you how much you wanted to borrow that, if you felt like you were in a growth spurt, or how much you wanted to stay your authentic self.
Which do you prefer to do more, anchor or report?
Oh, definitely reporting, because taking me out into the community with the people who I interact with gives me the better anchor perspective. I think that when you're in the community and you're experiencing your people, your neighbors, the issues, when you get back on that anchor desk, you have a perspective that you wouldn't have if you weren't walking around in your own community. So I think they're both equally important, but I would give the edge to reporting.
When you and I, back in the day, as
Yes.
we were talking about, but the 70s, 80s, the 90s, we had the luxury when we went out on stories to have a photographer and an audio person.
I never had an audio person.
Well, I did in
Okay.
Baltimore. in the big city, we had
Okay,
audio
there you
person.
go.
But my point being, there was someone else to record so that you could focus on asking the right questions and reporting the story and writing the story. That's not the same case today, necessarily.
No.
In other words, reporters are also shooting their own stuff and writing their own stuff and editing their own stuff. They're doing kind of all of it. Do you see that as a positive, or is that more stress upon the journalist in terms of just trying to get the story right?
Well, I do think this. Everything old is new again. I started out as a one-man band back in the 70s, where I had to shoot my story and report my story on my own. And now we've gotten to a point in the industry where there is an uptick in the number of MMJs, and those are multimedia journalists. And they're expected to go out and shoot their story, edit their story, research their story, gather the interviews, and also put a digital version of that on the web. So all of that is about a time management model that is very challenging for some and easy for others. So it just depends on who you talk to about whether or not those constraints or challenges create an opportunity for them to do more of what they want to do, or whether it inhibits what they're able to do out in the field. But I do think that having an investigative unit, it's helpful because everybody with the unit still has a photojournalist and time to research for it. So for the in-depth stories, that is a different approach. But for the day-to-day, day-turn stories, that is specifically an MMJ model. So that's the way it is.
And, it's so interesting because when I started in the business, starting in Baltimore, which was a union market, larger market, there were certain things that we were not allowed to do. And so it like you said, it really depends on the individual and the way that you can make things work. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. I think you might know this person. Maggie joins us from Jessup, Maryland. Hello, Maggie.
Hi there, Maggie.
Hi, girls. I should say ladies. I just had to call because when Barb put out that you were going to be on Ciara, I had to call and say it's been wonderful getting to know you both. Of course, Barb Ham and I both know each other from Baltimore when she was an intern when I first started working at BAL.
Yes.
But, the doors that she's opened for me have been fantastic down in your area. But, Barb, you are such a wonderful person. It's wonderful to hear you talking about your whole journey to Norfolk, and I'm so happy for you.
Thank you, Maggie.
I know it's to walk away from it is hard, but at the same time, you've got a lot of other things going on with your life. Is Scrappy there for you today?
Scrappy is with his friends at Dogtown, and he wouldn't let me pull him away from his crew today.
I'm glad you brought up Scrappy, Maggie, because I do have to ask her about Scrappy.
Halloween costumes were wild this year. And, I love the Scrap Man. He's definitely wonderful, and it shows your creativity and your imagination. And if people do not know about Scrappy, they should.
Yes.
They should.
But,
find him on Facebook.
And I'll see you all in a couple of weeks because we're coming down for the Jazz Festival. But I wish God's blessings always.
Thank you.
Continued success and happiness.
Thank you, Maggie. It's so good to hear from you. Maggie Linton, and those of you who listen to Sirius XM, I know that you know that name. And she's also doing her own thing. She has her own podcast now, and she is still
and I
just
follow
going
her on Facebook.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for that call. We appreciate that. So when you look at journalists today versus throughout your career, where would you put them in terms of tenacity, in terms of the craft of journalism? What do you see different, I guess, is what I'm asking.
I don't think there's a difference. I'll be honest with you. I think that it depends on who you're talking to, because I find that there are some young, tenacious, inquisitive, curious, serious about the journalism, young people, and there are those who get into it for all the wrong reasons because they just simply want to be on television. But when I see the journalist, the young journalist who is hungry to find the story, wants to put the mic in the community to give a voice to the people, that's the relationship I nourish, because I know that they're going to be the journalist who is in it so that they can actually do what we were intended to do, and that is tell the story of the people. But yeah, there are people who get into the business and don't know what the business is. And if you ask them what is a journalist, they may hesitate and not know how to answer that question. So I did find that to be the same in the 80s. There were people who got into it and thought that, I have a drama degree. Can I? No, girl. This is journalism. So, the same issues that we had back then when we thought people didn't take the business seriously are the same issues that we have now with a segment. But there are also very serious people in this business. I feel I am leaving it in good hands.
I tell you, and I call you often because from a management perspective, from a news director's perspective, the occasional subject verb agreement drives me nuts on the air.
Yeah, Barbara will call me. She's going to text me, and she's going to let me know if she sees something she doesn't enjoy.
Or the misspellings on the air. I mean, it's just little things that I think, as a whole, you want to make sure that your product is the very best. How is it for journalists of color these days? Because I know during the 80s and 90s, you and I were trailblazers in this industry. And while we see many more journalists of color, and particularly African-American journalists on the air, I'm not so sure that that's still happening in management.
That's where I agree. I agree that we still have to struggle to bring more people of color in the management ranks, in the general manager ranks, in the VP corporate ranks, and in ownership ranks. So where the battle was, can we just populate the newsroom so that there's diversity of thought when we approach stories, so that we can tell people that there's another way of looking at this particular issue? That's where it was really important in those editorial meetings to get those voices so that there would be diversity of coverage. Now we need, and still need, more diverse people within the management ranks. And that battle, I think, is ongoing, along with general managers and particularly ownership.
You played a huge role, still continue to play a huge role with the National Association of Black Journalists, the largest organization of journalists of color in the world. And as president, that puts you on a national platform that you took well advantage of in terms of getting out the issues. How was that for you?
Well, it was a bit of a struggle because we advocate for journalists, and sometimes we are stepping right up to the line with that advocacy. And there were times where I was cautioned by my employer, you're taking a national position in the Don Imus issue. You're talking to the Washington Post. You are going on the air talking about this with a position. And so this may be in conflict. So there were times where it was a difficult balance representing that
between
organization.
Being a journalist and being non-partisan or equal, nonpartisan. What is the word I'm looking for? Not taking a position.
Taking a position in a national issue.
Yeah. Okay. Right. And how did your management handle that?
There was a letter put in my file. This is like, you have been warned. You have taken a position on a national issue, and it has been recognized that kind of advocacy is outside of the realm of a journalist, and you have been warned. So I decided to stay focused on I was elected by that association to lobby for them, to advocate for them. And so I felt I cannot step back. If it's a risk to my career, so be it. But I had to be true to the platform that I lobbied on.
What was the conversation that you had with your management before you decided to run? Or did you have a conversation with them?
Yeah, because I wanted to make sure that I had the support of my organization. We were owned by the New York Times at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I said, listen, my plan, I had already served 2 terms as vice president of broadcast of NABJ. I said, my goal is to become president. I actually had the publisher of the New York Times wearing my button at the convention. So I had full support. Now, sometimes people support you and don't know what that support means, right? So, I mean, it's all gravy and biscuits as long as there's no controversy.
Right.
But once that comes, then, they have to tell me what their issues are, and I have to tell them where I stand.
Mm-hmm. So tell the story, Barbara, of how we met.
Oh my goodness. It was a Super Bowl game.
Yep.
I can't even tell you who was playing.
I don't even know.
Because the two of us started talking. You were, I think, the news director at the time at WTKR, and I was at Channel 13. And we just started yapping, and we connected so well. And I thought, I've got a new BFF, and I was right, because all these years later, here we are.
Here we are. And we actually went to an NABJ regional meeting the following week. And I'll never forget this. We were in the car, and we never turned the radio on.
We never stopped
we just
talking.
Talked the entire.
And it was from then on they start calling us the two Barbaras.
Yes, absolutely. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Billy joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Billy. You're on the air.
Hello, Billy.
Hello, Barbara, and hello, Barbara, again.
Hi.
Hi. So, Barbara, congratulations to you and all that you're doing. I just want to say I feel that I know you personally, and I appreciate your interaction with your viewers. Everywhere I go or wherever we are, I can speak to you as though I've been knowing you forever, which I probably have.
Thank you.
And Barbara Lee Ham, you are the bomb, always pleasant as well. But my question today is, what was the relationship that you had with the other black female anchors in the area, like Diana Morgan and Alvita Ewell and even Ava Hurdle, those ladies. What type of relationship did you guys have? Was it like a sisterhood or?
Okay. Thank you, Billy, for the call. We appreciate that.
Yes, it is something like a sisterhood. I'll say that Ava Hurdle.
What a sweet soul.
Oh my gosh, what a beautiful human being.
Yes.
And both she and I belonged to St. Mary's, and when it was time for me to get reconfirmed, she, stepped up and helped me with that. Alvita Ewell, she and I kept changing spots in the market. We're longtime friends. When I was leaving 13, she was coming in, and I said, girl, let me tell you, and I gave her information that she needed to know, and we have been very, very close throughout that process. We changed hands again later on. So yeah, a sisterhood. And who's the third person that he mentioned?
Diana Morgan.
Oh, Diana,
who
yeah.
I never met. She left the market just before I got here.
Yeah, well, she and I stayed in contact probably up until about 5 or 6 years ago. Now, a lot of people may remember she went to Miami. I went down and visited her there in South Beach. Then she went to Chicago, and then she ended up in Hollywood, where she has gotten a lot of steady bit part works in acting. So I understand she's still thriving there.
That is great. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the career of Hampton Roads icon, News 3 anchor, and managing editor Barbara Ciara. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call. Have you run into Barbara in public? What has been your experience talking with her? Give us a call and let us know. Oh, we just lost a call that we were just about to take. Okay, so we will just continue our conversation then. When you move from station to station, well, let me ask a different question. There were some issues that you faced, all anchors face, because you're in the public eye. I mean, people have something to say about the way you speak. They may have something to say about your hair, or the jewelry you wear, or your size, or, and all of that. How do you manage that part of being a journalist? Because that has nothing to do with telling a good story about
or
what's
your
happening
research,
in your thing,
or count the Emmys. But anyway, but yeah, I mean, sometimes that can be a little difficult, and I try to manage it with a sense of humor. And I think that that's what I have to bring to the table. I had a news director at one point in my career here, and as you know, my weight has fluctuated up and down over the years. And he actually had me in his office, and he said, people are wondering why I hired a fat anchor. And I said,
he said that to you?
He said that to me. And I said, well, there are fat people out there, and I represent them. You should be happy. So, I like try to bring a sense of humor to something that can be a very off-putting.
Yeah.
And then, there are the phone calls where people will make comments, about your appearance and that kind of thing. And I try to be as pleasant as I can be. But I said, unless you want to personally give me a budget for you to go and purchase these items, I think that maybe we should skip past that subject. And then sometimes I get a chuckle out of them, and sometimes they go, well, okay. It is what it is. And, and the thing is that you have to understand that as a public figure that you are up there, and people will criticize, they'll like or they'll dislike. But, at some point in your career, you become a bit Teflon, and you go, that's what you think, baby. You keep thinking that. That's good. I'll keep doing me.
What was the difference between reporting in Hampton Roads and reporting in Tucson?
Oh, because I was such a newbie in Tucson. I made all my mistakes in Tucson. And so I didn't have, I think, the people I needed around me in Tucson to help shape my coverage, the kinds of questions you need to ask in an interview, setting up stories. That was that slow process that I went through. I had more mentors in management that helped me move to that next step than I did for on air. So I think the growth I had actually happened here in Hampton Roads.
Talk to us about your time here at WHRO, because you had a partnership with WVEC,
yes,
I believe, and tell it since we're here. at WHRO Public Media. Tell us about that.
It made headlines. We had a television program where my old friend who I worked with at WAVY, that was Kathy Lewis, she and I co-anchored a half an hour show. Much of it was built around the big news stories that I had that I brought to the table, and we expanded on that subject matter. So it was an opportunity with public television to take an issue and then broaden it with interviews. And so we had the best time doing that. And it was a marvelous partnership because we both were so passionate about journalism, and Kathy with her lovely interviewing skills would pinpoint certain things. It still was a good relationship.
You've talked to people from President Barack Obama to Oprah to,
your old friend Oprah.
Yes, a bunch of different people. But do you approach the interview process differently if it's a famous person versus you're going to talk to a mother who may have just lost her son?
When I was much younger in my career, I used to bring these index cards. And I was just so married to these index cards to ask these certain questions, no matter who it was.
Didn't matter.
It didn't matter. And then at some point I learned that these people are looking at me, look at the cards. They're not looking at me, looking at them. So I put some bullet points in my mind for each interview. And I decided that let the conversation be organic, no matter who it is. And that made me graduate from bachelor's to master's to PhD in journalism, because people appreciate the eye contact and they know you see them and you listen to them. The index cards just had to go away. So I learned a lot from not getting what I thought I needed out of those interviews, and the thing that was the constant when it didn't go well were the index cards.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I would train journalists as a news director, I would always tell them, read the press release, read the information so that you have an idea of what the story is about, but then go out and actually discover the story.
Right.
Because you're not regurgitating what a PR person is telling you. You really should be looking for the real story. And that comes out of true conversation. That's interesting about the cards because I do a list. As you can see, I got a list of questions here. But I only do that to kind of
prompt
orient
you to the
my
next
mind.
point.
Exactly. And just go into the conversation, just have conversation.
Yeah, but I had them just very
right in
front of me. I felt like they were dividing me from the people I was talking to. And I think that once I eliminated that, I got a much more authentic response.
What do you say to people who say, "Oh, well, commercial news, it's just, if it bleeds, it leads. That's it's not important."
I think that we've been through periods of broadcast history where we've gone through some fits and starts where that had been the focus. And that was not a comfortable period of time in commercial television news when that was the thing that was the easiest. What's happened, I think, over the years is everybody who has a brain understands that's the low-hanging fruit. And what you need to do is bring journalism to the show where everybody can identify with whatever that subject matter is. And leading a show with multiple crime events is not a way for people to say, I really want to see what's coming next. Now, there are going to be events where you have to cover that because maybe it was a big traumatic event in this community. But doing that, a steady diet of that, would kill this industry. You have to go out and talk about the real stories that impact the people.
How do you approach a difficult subject? The people who lost loved ones in Virginia Beach, as an example. When you have that traumatic a story, and it also affects you because you live here and you are a citizen of Hampton Roads as well. What goes through your mind? How do you approach that type of interview, knowing that you have to do it?
Well, we had reporters during the 2019 event who cried on the air. They were so impacted. They were impacted when the Walmart mass shooting happened. It's traumatic for the community. And what we do is we want to always give grace. because there are individuals who are survivors, who are related to the victims, and we say what we want to do is make sure that people don't forget your loved one. So if you care to speak about your loved one, we will give you that platform. It shouldn't be because we want it. It should be because the family wants it as a platform to talk about the person they lost. Because in many occasions, that gets lost in the translation. People cover the event, they talk about the shooter and all of that. And what we really need to pay attention to is, what was the collateral damage here? Who were these people? They were moms, they were dads, they were uncles, aunts, daughters, sons. Who were they? And let's tell their story. So that's the approach. And then we leave it in the hands of the family. And if the family wants to get back and tell that story, we give them that space.
I think that's really important for people to understand, because people think that you just run out there and throw a mic in somebody's face. And that's not the reason.
Well, that's on the movies. I mean, the movies portray it that way all the time. But, the sensitivity that we need to, and I hope I know that there are probably some journalists that don't believe that or behave that way, but I would hope that anybody who has a family, you always have to put yourself in their place.
757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So you started school in Arizona and you got a job. So you decided to blossom your career. And then you decided one day, you called me and you said, I'm going back to school. And you went back to Hampton University.
I did, at the urging of Dr. Harvey when he was president. And I would see him every year at the Jazz Festival. And it became known to him that I dropped out of college to take my first broadcast news job. And he said, when you finish, not if, when you finish, do it at Hampton. So at one point, my son moved here in the 90s with his children. And I started looking at my grandchildren thinking, at some point they're going to ask me, where did you graduate? So I decided to knock out those last 30 credit hours at Hampton University. And it almost killed me, but I did it.
So in this next chapter, any thought of going on to master's or PhD? Or
I am going to get a PhD in international travel with the love of my life, Dr. James Wilson.
I want to go to that school.
That's where we're going.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Tell us about Dr. James Wilson. Do you want to share?
Yes, some very good friends set us up on a blind date on New Year's Eve. And we connected immediately, and we have been together ever since. And then last spring, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. And what was wonderful is that we both had planned to end our careers at the end of this year, and it was like, kismet.
Wow.
So we're both on the same page.
And so travel is in the forecast.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Oh, that is fantastic. That is great. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call. Give us a call. We've only got about 15 minutes left in the show. So if you want to say something to Barbara Ciara, now is the time. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. I
should ask you a question, Barbara.
Uh-oh.
Because,
I knew it was coming.
Yeah, well, see, the thing is that a lot of people don't know is we were competitors in our budding friendship back in the 90s.
Yes, we were. And actually, let me take this moment talking about things to thank you for. So when I came to this market in 1993 as the assistant news director, not knowing anyone and so forth. But when Barbara and I met and connected, the one thing that she did for me that was amazing especially since we were competitors in the marketplace, was that you would take me with you to on your speaking engagements, and you would introduce me to the mayors and to the politicians and the other movers and shakers in the area that I needed to know in order to be effective in my job. And I want to say publicly thank you for that, because that was huge.
Well, you knew that was necessary. And I think one of the other listeners talked about that, whether it was a sisterhood, but I think it's more about the journalism community and supporting people who who can, make better journalism in the community. So, it was my pleasure.
And I tell you, you and I had that personally, but Hampton Roads Black media professionals in general. I mean, talk about being embraced by a community, because as a journalist, you were very lucky to be able to stay in one market.
Yes,
I've worked in Baltimore, Washington, Philadelphia, finally located to Norfolk, and have been able to stay here the longest, even though I took a break and went back to Maryland in the middle of that. But that's, being able to stay in one market and be successful is unusual in our business.
It is, and I'm very fortunate, because there was one point in the 90s where I had opportunities to leave, but this was the point when my son was here with my grandchildren, and I had sacrificed a lot for this industry, and I chose not to sacrifice watching them grow up. So it was better for me to navigate within this market than outside of this market. And to give credit to this market, I've been able to cover international stories by being here in Hampton Roads. You've got the largest naval installation in the world here. And then, this is a place where all the movers and shakers come, or you can go to them. So I didn't feel like my career was missing anything by not leaving this zip code.
So let's talk about this work-life balance thing.
Oh, my.
Because at points in times during both of our careers, there has been no work-life balance. It's been the work balance.
Yeah. I like to tell the story that in the 80s, I thought I had everything. I had the best house. I had the best husband. I had the best dog. I had the best cat. And by the time the 90s came, I think I still had a cat. So,
yes.
Because the marriage went by the wayside because of the career, everything kind of was... My career trumped everything in my life. So I think that today we have a group of people who come in who understand the importance of work-life balance, and they want to pay equal homage to each of those things.
757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. George joins us from Norfolk. Hi, George. You're on the air.
Hello, Miss Barbara Hemley and Barbara Ciara. Barbara, you've done a very good job working alongside of WVEC. I was a baby when you were at WVEC, and you went to you baby alongside. You started Wavy TV 10. I didn't watch Wavy TV 10 when I was a baby. I did watch you at WVEC and then at WTKI.
Okay.
So you're very familiar. Are you familiar with Norfolk Coffee and Tea Company? My uncle Chris often works there, and my late Nelson is a gentleman.
Yes.
He passed away in 2010.
Oh.
I want to know, please, how many times have you stopped by Norfolk Coffee and Tea Company to, let's say, a pickup coffee to take back to the TV stations, or does the TV stations deliver? Or does Norfolk Coffee? Or does Norfolk Coffee and Tea Company deliver coffee to the TV station?
No, I'm not familiar with the delivery, but I know that I would often stop there. And because I'm such a caffeine addict, I couldn't tell you the number of times that I stopped by there. But yes, if you saw me over there, that's no lies were ever told. I was definitely there picking up the coffee.
All right, let's talk to Ed in Hampton. Hi, Ed. You're on the air. Hello.
Yes.
Ed, can turn your radio down, and you're on the air.
Oh, yes. Oh, wonderful. First of all, congratulations both to Barbara Hamley and Barbara Ciara. You are very special in my life.
Thank you.
I've been. I was on the air a couple times making a few comments to Barbara Hamley, Wonderful program. But my hat's off to Barbara Ciara. I've watched her on TV for years, have learned so much from her. And I have some comments here I would like to make.
Okay, very quickly, Ed, because we're almost out of time.
Okay, Barbara Ciara is a beautiful woman. She is a tremendous educator. She has always done her homework, and she has worked in the trenches and survived. She's always spoken the truth. She has a wonderful sense of humor, a wonderful public figure, a survivor, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, Ed, that is so
Ed.
kind. Thank you so much.
Thank
we
you,
appreciate
Ed.
that. Go ahead.
No, that's such a wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm kind of embarrassed here. I don't know how to respond. Thank you for that. That's very meaningful to me. It really is.
So, as you talk with young journalists today, what do you tell them about the business and how to be a Barbara Ciara?
Well,
or do you tell them how to be?
No, I absolutely want them to be themselves. And so I try to find out who they are and see how we can help build on that. But based on what you say, I always try to get the young journalists to, hey, come on, grammar is something you should come to the table with. How do you shape your story? How do you bring the best out of the sound that you're making? You know, that kind of thing. So that kind of coaching. But I pay attention to the journalists who I think really want to be journalists. So I begin there.
Good. Sandra joins us from Hampton. Hi, Sandra. You're on the air.
Hello. Thank y'all. This is a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Two things. First, the hair thing. I love it. I saw you cover a football practice, Miss Barbara and Ciara, and wanted just to thank you to give me that courage to change or not to change the do. I'm going to leave it at that. It was just very encouraging along with other ladies that are around me, but also the importance of grammar in the news outlets that I'm seeing. I can just feel my grandmother turning in her grave. She was an educator,
yes,
and always correcting us. So, you know, we would have to do the, change our vernacular when we were around her.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Sandra.
Thank you.
You know, it's interesting. The curly, you wear your hair curly, natural.
Yeah.
But that was a major shift in terms of women of color and being able to wear their hair in natural hairstyles.
Natural or braids or anything that was perceived as ethnic.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk, what did you, when you saw that happening, I mean, what was the fight? And was NABJ involved by any chance?
Not so much in that, because I think we had so many other fires to put out at that point. There may have been minor skirmishes where we would come to the aid of some local people who were under fire. But I had braids in Tucson. And then when I was told at one point when I took braids again at 13 when I first got here that, well, no, we're not doing that. And do something else. And then you can come back on the air. So it was always a pushback. Now, in what we said at the time, and there are many people on this, in this hour who may not remember, Bo Derek, who did braids in a movie, and it was quite fashionable for her to do it, but then you could not translate that same hairstyle, which then became popular with a greater audience over the air. So it's been, that hair parody has been a struggle for all the years that I've been in the business.
Well, to a point where now we have the Crown Act.
Exactly.
So that people can actually wear their hair the way that they want.
The way it grows out of their skull.
Exactly. And express themselves the way that they like. I want to try to get a few more calls in. Let's go to Karen in Virginia Beach. Hi, Karen. You're on the air.
Thank you. I wanted to thank Barbara because I've lived in this area my entire life, and Barbara has been very much a part of the media and, in an essence, to this community. And so thank you for that.
Thank you.
My question is, in this growing age where young people want to get to network news, and I understand career development, but how confident are you in the young people coming up representing the Hampton Roads area and being part of our community in both media, print, and in television is a very critical time in news in general. So I'm interested in your viewpoint, and I'll take your answer offline. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen, for the call.
Thank you, Karen. Make no mistake about it. These are very challenging times for journalists in all platforms. The call to question our credibility has been under fire for some years now. And there almost has to be an explainer that, we have, gone to separate sources to try to balance our stories for people to believe that we really are trying to be unbiased in our approach. I think that the continuing education that we're doing for young people in the industry right now is to reemphasize almost daily the need to get 1, 2, 3 sides of a story, make every effort to get every voice involved in the story so that people can make up their own minds about whatever that issue is, making sure that having editors look over these scripts to take out any hint of bias so that our viewers will see a story in its raw, so that, there's no slant. And not that we weren't doing that before, but there is an extra microscope right now on the industry. So in terms of confidence, if these young people are hearing our drumbeat right now that our industry is under fire and these are the reasons and this is what you have to do, that's what we're doing right now to ensure that our credibility reemerges after this storm.
As you talk to younger journalists in particular about their life-work balance, also encouraging them that it is okay to stay in a market. I mean,
yes.
Everybody thinks that you have to go small market, medium market, I'm trying to get to New York or what other large city. But that's not necessarily the way to have a fulfilling journalism career.
Yeah, and it depends on the journalist. I mean, there are some people who want to do that climb,
sure,
right? And God bless them. And you know what? The work that you have to put into that is unmatched. I mean, all my friends at the network, they sleep, eat news all the time. They have to get
they got to get up and go whenever it happens.
Whenever the call happens.
Yeah.
So your life is almost not your own. And so I say, be sure that you understand that taking this on means that, you are giving up a part of yourself. So, and then for the folks who want to settle in, some people are coming back home. We've got some journalists who grew up here, went away, and have come back. And I think they see this as a career choice to be at home. So it depends. I mean, it just depends on the journalist you're talking to, where they want to be and how they see themselves.
Okay, and I know time, so we got a minute and a half. I'm going to let you have the last minute and a half
to
tell.
Goodness.
Well, 1 minute. Oh, my producer just said 1 minute. Tell the audience what you want them to know.
I just want to let you know, and I want everyone who is hearing this to know how grateful I am that they allowed me into their home, their spaces, allowed me to interview you, allowed me to tell your story, trusted everything that I did over all these years, 43 of them here in Hampton Roads and 50 overall. I have felt the love and support of this place as if I did grow up here. I mean, there were times where my career was in jeopardy and people demonstrated on my behalf. I will never, ever forget that as long as I live, that it meant something to people to see me continue. So I leave with a grateful heart.
And we wish you the very, very best. And I get to have a front row seat. Yay. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank
We're
you, Barbara.
so proud of you. Absolutely. And we hope you've enjoyed this edition of Another View. Do me a favor. Share this show with a friend. Go to anotherviewradio.org and download the podcast. And while you're there, please sign up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. Next week on Another View, the Another View Roundtable analysis of the outcome of the November elections. Should be interesting. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Jordan Christie is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Thanks so much for listening, and let's get together again next Thursday at noon for another view. And Barbara, say your signature line.
Thanks for the company.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever, whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.